You are expired goods, Lauren. You are a milk cow that has run dry. My mother didn't blink as she slid the contract across the table. Now I need a new calf. Hand Maya over. Or I will tell the press you are a meth addict and take her anyway. My father, Silas, wiped sweat from his forehead. Just sign the papers, he snapped. The studio needs an answer by morning. I looked down at the document. It wasn't a gift. It was a custody transfer selling my 6-year-old daughter to a modeling agency known for destroying kids. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked up at the crown molding where I knew a camera was hidden. I smiled. Then I picked up the contract, folded it, and put it in my purse. They thought I was taking it to sign. They didn't know I was taking it to bury them. I drove my rusted sedan down the winding driveway of the estate I bought but was never allowed to live in. The iron gates closed behind me, sealing them inside their fortress of stolen wealth. My hands were steady, but my mind drifted back to the days they called the glory days. To the world, I was America's sweetheart. But the reality was 18-hour workdays under studio lights that felt like interrogation lamps. I remember being 7 years old, fighting to keep my eyes open while a makeup artist painted over the dark circles under my eyes. I remember the smell of the expensive scotch Silas drank in his trailer while I memorized lines. $500 a bottle. He drank my college tuition one glass at a time. The memory that haunts me is the day I turned 12. I had fractured my tibia during a stunt rehearsal. The doctor said I needed 6 weeks in a cast, but we had a live performance scheduled for a charity gala the next night. Silas came into the hospital room, checking his watch. Cancellation fees are for losers, Lauren, he said coldly. You can rest when you are dead. Wrap it up and get on stage. So I danced. I smiled through pain so white-hot it made my vision blur. When I came off stage, vomiting from the agony, Sandra didn't hand me an ice pack. She handed me a breath mint and told me to get back out there for the curtain call. That was the moment I learned that to them, I wasn't a person. I was an asset. Contrast that with my sister, Clara. While I sweated through stage makeup, Clara attended the best private schools and had horse riding lessons. Tonight, she sat there swirling wine, wearing a vintage Rolex bought the same year my trust fund mysteriously shrank by exactly $12,000. Back at the dinner, before I walked out, Silas had looked under the table at my worn-out sneakers and chuckled. You really should invest in better footwear, Lauren, he sneered. It is embarrassing to see you walking around like a beggar. He mocked the poverty he created. He stood on a mountain of my stolen money and looked down on me. But as I merged onto the highway, I didn't feel shame. I felt clarity. They thought the girl who danced on a broken leg would never fight back. They were wrong. The pain had calcified into something useful. They forgot one thing. I still had the keys. I carried Maya into our small apartment and tucked her into bed. I sat in the corner, watching her sleep. This was safety. It wasn't crystal goblets, but it was mine. For years, people asked why I stayed. Why did I keep going back? It wasn't just fear. It was a dance. Sandra and Silas were masters of the gaslight tango. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. It creates an addiction. You lose and lose until you are desperate, and then ding, the jackpot hits. For me, the jackpot was lasagna. When I was 10, I booked a national commercial. That night, the house wasn't cold. Sandra was in the kitchen, humming. She made her famous 5-cheese lasagna and brushed my hair for an hour, telling me I was her special girl. Silas poured me sparkling cider and toasted to my talent. I felt loved. But when I didn't book the next gig, the house went silent. They looked through me like I was a ghost. No lasagna. No affection. Just the suffocating weight of being a disappointment. I spent 20 years chasing the lasagna, trying to recreate that warmth. I became an addict, begging for crumbs of affection from the people starving me. I looked at Maya. Tonight, they tried to start the music for her. Sign the contract, and we will love you. Make us money, and you will be special. The realization hit me physically. It wasn't love. It was training. They were training her to be the new asset. I stood up and looked at my reflection. Tired, yes, but not broken. The little girl who wanted her mother to brush her hair was dead. She died the moment Sandra exhaled smoke into my daughter's face. They wanted a dance? Fine. But the tempo was about to change. Back in the guest room, I waited until the house settled into a drunk silence at 2 a.m. I dissolved the compliant daughter mask and unzipped my bag. I hadn't brought clothes. I brought equipment. I took out a high-end baby monitor with a frequency scanner. Cheap wireless cameras operate on the same frequency. If you get close enough, they scream. I walked into the ensuite bathroom and turned the monitor on. I moved it toward the ornate mirror above the sink. Screech. The feedback was loud. I killed the power and pressed my phone's flashlight against the glass. There it was. The purple glint of a pinhole camera lens behind the two-way mirror. Silas had bragged about his passive income. It wasn't crypto. He had been selling footage of me in this bathroom as a child. Now, he had the room prepped for Maya. The rage was absolute zero. I recorded the feedback noise and the lens glint on my phone. Evidence secured. I slipped out and went to Silas's home office. The heavy oak door had a digital keypad. A younger me would have stopped here. But I knew Silas. He was a narcissist. I typed in 0812. August 12th. The release date of my first feature film. The day I became his retirement fund. Click. The light turned green. Inside, the office smelled of stale cigars. I went straight to the wall, safe behind the painting. It was open a crack. He was sloppy when he drank. Inside, I found it. The red ledger. It was a crime scene in ink. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. Page after page of managerial fees deducted from my Coogan Trust Fund money legally mine. Siphoned off for travel expenses to places I had never been. But the most important thing wasn't what he stole. It was what he owed. On the last page, circled in red, was a frantic note. Bookie debt due Friday. Short 200,000. Legs or cash. I almost laughed. They weren't just greedy. They were drowning. They had gambled away the stolen millions. They didn't want to sign Maya for her talent. They needed her signing bonus to pay a loan shark before Friday. I photographed every page. I photographed the note. I put the book back exactly as I found it. I had the receipts. I had the motive. Now, I had the trap. It took 2 weeks for the desperation to set in. I didn't call. I knew the bookies' deadline had passed and they were terrified. Terrified people make mistakes. I waited until a Tuesday morning and dialed Sandra. I made my voice shake, forcing tears into my throat until I sounded like the pathetic daughter they wanted. "Mom," I whispered. "I don't know what to do. The landlord is threatening eviction." "I told you, Lauren," she scoffed. "You can't make it on your own." "I know. You were right. But a producer from Global Studios contacted me. They want Maya." The line went silent. I could hear her greed. "What do they want?" "A trilogy," I lied. "A guaranteed 3-picture deal. The contract is $5 million. I heard the gasp. $5 million was their salvation. "But," I added, dropping the hook, "they are strict. They won't sign with me because I have no assets. They need a management team with proven solvency. They need to see a representation of assets to prove her managers aren't just using the child for money." It was the perfect trap. To get the $5 million, they had to prove they already had money. They had to reveal the hoard. "We can handle that," Sandra said instantly. "We have assets. We can manage her." "Okay. But we have to sign today." My lawyer set up a meeting at his firm downtown. 2 hours later, I sat in the conference room of a high-rise law firm. My lawyer, Marcus, sat stone-faced at the head of the table. The table was empty except for a single document. The asset declaration form. Silas and Sandra walked in wearing their armor, bespoke suits, and diamonds stolen from me. They looked arrogant. Victorious. They strutted past the receptionist like they owned the building. They looked at me with contempt, like a master looking at a servant who finally remembered her place. "You finally came to your senses," Silas boomed. $5 million. Not bad. We will take our standard 20% management fee. "Of course," I said, staring at the table. They were so focused on the imaginary money they didn't notice the room was freezing. They didn't notice Marcus wasn't smiling. They thought they were walking in to sign a check. They were walking into an incinerator. Silas leaned back in his leather chair, expansive. He uncapped his Mont Blanc pen bought with my money and looked at the document. The representation of assets. To him, this paper was a formality. He didn't read the fine print. He didn't ask why Marcus was recording. He just saw dollar signs. He began to write, listing the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the crypto wallets, every hidden reservoir of wealth he had siphoned from me. He was listing them to prove he was solvent enough to manage Maya. Sandra watched him, eyes glittering. Watching him write, I realized something profound. People like Silas believe money is power. They think hidden millions make them untouchable. But money is only power when it is clean. When it is dirty, it isn't a shield. It is a bomb. And he was writing down the detonation codes. He finished with a flourish. "Done," he said, sliding the paper to Marcus. "That should satisfy the studio. When do we get the contract?" Marcus took the document, reviewed the list, and picked up a red ink stamp. Thud. He stamped it. Exhibit A. Silas frowned. "What is that? Where's the contract?" I leaned forward. The shaking was gone. "There is no contract, Dad. There is no movie deal. Sandra laughed nervously. What are you talking about? You said. I lied, Mom. Just like you lied when you said you loved me. Just like you lied when you said you were saving my money for my future. Silas stood up, face flushing. Is this a joke? I am leaving. You are not going anywhere, Marcus said, his voice heavy. You just signed a sworn affidavit listing assets that you have failed to declare to the IRS for 20 years. You also admitted to commingling these funds with a minor's trust. Silas froze. The blood drained from his face. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by raw panic. I picked up a remote and pointed it at the wall screen. And just in case you try to claim those accounts are legitimate, let's look at the source. The screen lit up with high-resolution photos of the red ledger. The account numbers matched the document he just signed. But the ledger had notes. Transfer from Coogan Trust, travel expenses, $40,000. Webcam revenue, $15,000. Clara, my sister, looked up from her phone. Her mouth fell open as she saw her name next to a withdrawal. Clara's tuition, $35,000. You said you paid for that with your bonus, she whispered to Silas. He didn't answer. I have one more thing, I said. I pressed play on my phone. Sandra's voice filled the room. We will bleed the brat dry just like her mother. Once we have custody, we can work her until she drops. Who cares? She's just inventory. Sandra let out a strangled sound. She lunged across the table for the document Marcus held. Give me that! You tricked us! Marcus slid it into a locked portfolio. It is already digitized and uploaded to our secure server, Mrs. Bennett. Attempting to destroy evidence is a felony. Sit down. She collapsed into her chair. Silas gripped the table, knuckles white. He looked at me, and I saw a small, terrified old man. You ungrateful, he stammered. I stood up. Thank you for coming. I think we are done here. Silas slammed his fist on the table. I will sue you. I will bury you in court until you are begging on the street. I didn't flinch. I took Maya's hand. She wasn't scared because she saw I wasn't scared. You cannot sue anyone, Dad, I said steady. Because 5 minutes ago, when you admitted to these assets on record, Marcus triggered a civil asset forfeiture protocol with the IRS and FBI. He also faxed your signed confession to your bank's fraud department. Silas blinked. What? They triggered an immediate suspicious activity freeze. Your accounts are locked. Your credit cards are dead. You don't have the money to hire a lawyer. You don't even have money to pay for parking. I turned to Sandra, who was weeping for her lost money. Goodbye, Mom. I walked out of the boardroom holding my daughter's hand. I didn't look back at the shouting. In the lobby, I paused to see Silas arguing with the receptionist. He swiped his black card. She shook her head. He swiped it again. She cut it with scissors. I walked out into the sunlight. The air tasted like oxygen. The justice wasn't instant, but it was thorough. 6 months later, the federal court sentenced Silas to 8 years in prison for tax evasion and fraud. Sandra received 5 years. The court ordered full restitution of $4.8 million to the Coogan Trust. They seized the estate, the cars, the jewelry. The community reaction was brutal. Their friends evaporated. They lost the audience they had performed for their entire lives. Clara was forced to drop out of university and is now working as a hostess, learning that respect is earned. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from a federal correctional facility. It was from Sandra. I sat on the porch of my new house, overlooking the ocean, holding the envelope. I didn't open it. I knew it would be the gaslight tango on paper. I did it for you. We were desperate. I am still your mother. I stood up and walked to the recycling bin. I dropped the unopened letter inside. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt indifference. That was the true victory. They no longer held the power to hurt me because they no longer held my attention. I walked down to the beach, where Maya was building a sandcastle with Grandma Eleanor. My grandmother looked up and waved. Marcus was there too, skipping stones with Maya. This was my chosen family, people who didn't put price tags on love. I looked out at the horizon. Here's the thing about family. We are taught that blood is a binding contract, that we owe our parents our loyalty, our silence, and our souls, no matter what they do to us. We are told that walking away is a sign of weakness, a failure of character. But that is a lie. Trust is earned, not owed. Respect is a two-way street, not a toll road. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to break the cycle. My parents tried to turn me into a product. They tried to turn my daughter into a paycheck. They thought I was weak because I stayed silent for so long. They forgot that the most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting threats. It is the one quietly gathering the receipts. I am Lauren. I am a mother. and I am free. Wow. That was intense. But I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are asking, why did she wait 20 years? Why didn't she leave the moment she turned 18? It is easy to judge from the outside, but let's break down the mechanics of why smart, capable people stay in toxic traps, and the genius moves Lauren used to finally escape. First, let's decode the psychology. Why did she stay? It is called the slot machine effect. In behavioral psychology, this is known as intermittent reinforcement. Think about it. If a slot machine never paid out, you would walk away immediately. If it paid out every single time, you would eventually get bored. But if it pays out randomly, just once every 100 pulls, you become addicted. Lauren's mother knew this. She starved Lauren of affection for months, then gave her one night of lasagna and hairbrushing. That one win keeps the victim pulling the lever, hoping the next pull will bring the jackpot of love again. Lauren wasn't stupid. She was chemically conditioned to chase those crumbs. If you are in a relationship where you are constantly auditing your behavior to earn a moment of peace, you aren't in love. You are in a casino. And the house always wins. Now, let's talk about the financial self-defense masterclass she just pulled off. This wasn't just revenge. This was strategic dismantling. Number 1, the audit strategy. Notice how Lauren stopped arguing and started documenting. Toxic people thrive in the gray areas of, he said, she said. They hate ink and paper. By photographing that red ledger and recording the hidden camera audio, she converted feelings into facts. In your own life, if things feel off, stop talking and start screenshotting. Evidence is the only language a manipulator respects. Number 2, the greed trap. Lauren didn't try to steal the money back. She used their own greed against them. By inventing the $5 million contract, she forced them to voluntarily list their hidden assets on a legal document. She didn't have to prove they were lying. She let them prove they were thieves in their own handwriting. Always remember, a narcissist's ego is their biggest blind spot. If you dangle a big enough prize, they will sign their own warrant. And finally, the nuclear option. Civil asset forfeiture. This is the ultimate street-smart move. She didn't wait for an apology that would never come. She went straight for the resource that gave them power. When you remove the money, you remove their ability to hurt you. She didn't just win the argument. She evicted them from the game entirely. Here is the verdict. You are not an asset. You are not a retirement plan. If someone only loves you when you are profitable, that is not a relationship. That is a transaction, and you have every right to close the account. I want to know your take. Have you ever had to audit your own family to protect your peace? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you want to get smarter about protecting your energy and your wallet, hit that subscribe button. Class dismissed.